Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Andrew. Welcome to the High School English Hub. Folks, today we're going to continue our discussion on political cartoons in our endeavor to help high school English students with their close reading, academic speaking, and academic writing. Mr. Giles, for unpacking political cartoons, we have an acronym.
Yes, that's right. Coral needs our care and love. The C stands for composition. We're thinking about all the arrangement of visual elements.
Yeah, the N stands for the narrative. We're thinking about the characters and the story that's embedded in this political cartoon.
O stands for objects and symbols. We're just thinking about the symbolic weight and unpacking those different symbols in the cartoon.
Yeah, the next C stands for the color and the shading. We want to think about the colors, or perhaps it's black and white and how shading is used.
And L stands for language. We're looking at labels and speech bubbles and thought bubbles and all the different elements of irony and sarcasm that might be in the language.
Yeah, Mr. Giles, let's just quickly review our cartoon from the last video, and then we can talk about what we wrote about that.
Yes, this cartoon is by a cartoonist named Patrick Chapat. He's a Swiss cartoonist. We love his work. This cartoon was in response to a climate change summit that took place in Dubai in the Middle East. And it's got some inherent criticisms about actually holding this climate change summit in a place like Dubai that is a petrostate that might be a contributor to climate change. And it's really casting a spotlight on human beings and how we are contributing to climate change.
Well said, Mr. Giles. Now, we love to use graphic organizers when we're doing our thinking and breaking down texts. And you can see in our graphic organizer, we have textual references on the left-hand side in blue. We have those features. In this case, these will be the features of political cartoons. Those will be in the middle in yellow, and sort of that orangish color is where we put that analysis and interpretation.
Yeah.
Mr. Giles, what was the first thing we wanted to talk about with respect to this cartoon?
We wanted to look at that polar bear and the diminishing iceberg. That obviously draws our attention. The graphic weight is there. We want to think about the size and scale of the polar bear in relation to the other things in the cartoon and the composition of the cartoon and the way the polar bear is arranged.
Yeah, also we want to think about that sad facial expression and almost that we see the emanata, we see sort of the iceberg sort of breaking, and we almost see that polar bear crying. I feel bad for that polar bear, right?
I do too, and we see a visual path too where our eye is drawn to that polar bear. The next thing we want to look at in the cartoon is the family. The family is, again, juxtaposed with that polar bear as they're gazing at this polar bear that's on display. It's like an attraction.
Yeah. Also, we see the young boy, his posture and his facial expression. He looks like he's experiencing pure jubilation. The mother is carrying a shopping bag. We talked about that object and how that implies materialism in favor over the environment. Lots of things going on with the family. What about Venice in the background?
Yeah, Venice in the background is interesting. We should be struck by the fact that that Venice is actually being displayed in Dubai, and actually Venice, there actually is a luxury hotel that is an imitation Venice. So again, I think Patrick Chapat is weaving that in, but also making us think a little bit about how Venice itself, the city, is sinking. Right?
Like the polar bear, it's in danger.
It's also in danger, right? So all those things are juxtaposed, and we're seeing that climate change is a global crisis.
Yeah, lastly, I think I'd want to talk about that enclosed ceiling. We'd expect to see a polar bear outside in this natural habitat, but here we sort of see this ugly yellowish ceiling. It really shows that it's enclosed. Again, with the ski resort over to the side, it's just such an unnatural setting. It's really a scathing commentary. Again, that's
right.
United Arab Emirates is consuming so much energy in a world where there's climate change is happening.
Okay, so the chart helps us really do some rich thinking. Now let's take a look at just a short piece of writing. This is 2 paragraphs where the student has unpacked this cartoon, and we're going to look at this piece of writing and think about how well they are sort of tackling this cartoon and taking it apart. What are some things that you noticed, first of all?
Well, I love the topic sentence, Mr. Giles. We've given the title of the political cartoon. We have the date that it was published. And then, of course, we have the cartoonist's name, Patrick Chapat. And then we have this small phrase, argues that. And after the word that, we have what we call our rich idea. Can you talk a little bit about what comes after the word that in this case?
Yeah. I mean, they're really thinking about that idea of these developing countries claim that they care about climate change, but actually there's a lot of hypocrisy. And there's an unwillingness. I like the word unwillingness to make meaningful changes. And that's a strong argument he's trying to make. And he makes that repeatedly in a lot of his cartoons.
He does. Now, the next thing the writer does is they're trying to leverage that chart. So they're going to bring in those blue textual references from that chart we just looked at. And Mr. Giles, we see right away they go for the polar bear. And what are some of the features they have pinned to this polar bear?
Well, what I like is I'm seeing that coral needs our care and love. I'm seeing the graphic weight. I'm really thinking about like ideas like the focal point. We're thinking about what the viewer is doing, how that's drawing our attention. We're also thinking about the characters and their expressions and the way that their posture. So I think they're doing a good job of taking it apart. The words in blue are specific details of the cartoon. So I can see a lot of analysis here.
Well, exactly. We talked about objects, right? There's that chunk of ice, and then the writer links that to this word symbol, right? So they're talking about how the chunk of ice symbolizes the deterioration or the decay of the natural environment. Again, coral needs our care and love is coming in handy. I see the small transition word, Mr. Giles, sadly, and then I see the author's name, Chappat. Why do we like to use the author's name?
Well, the author's in the driver's seat. You know, the author's the one making the choices. The author, the illustrator is the one who made the choices to create the cartoon. So we want to talk about what choices the author made or the creator made to send the message. I also like the phrase implies that. Why is that such a good phrase?
Mr. Giles, when we're doing analysis and interpretation, we want to draw conclusions from what we see. Sometimes there's things between the lines. We want to read between those lines and talk about the subtext. So that's what implications and inferences are. Let's go ahead and look at the second small paragraph. And we see a transition word, furthermore. It looks like we're sticking with objects. They're back on the shopping bag. And what do they infer about the shopping bag?
Well, they're thinking about the consumption. They're thinking about this idea of the consumptions and how that human beings oftentimes are more concerned with their own enjoyment, their own amusement than they are with the taking care of the planet. And that's sadly the case in the world. They're making us think about that enclosed space. It's also kind of symbolic and is quite interesting in terms of the setting. And I see continuing sort of looking at different features and details of the particular cartoon.
Yeah, and of course the writer wraps things up with a really clear and concise concluding sentence that links back to the topic sentence in pink. So we see the phrase thus through the cartoon, Chappat argues that. So again, we've kind of linked that concluding sentence back to the topic sentence and forming a really cohesive piece in writing. Folks, in the end, we hope that you understand that by making a quick table and thinking about textual references, thinking about features, and thinking about that author-audience relationship, if you combine that with our acronym,
Coral needs our care and love.
Stands for composition.
Yep. Narrative.
Objects.
Color.
And language. If we put all that together, you too can analyze, interpret, and speak and write about cartoons in an academic way. Thanks for watching the channel, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.